Hi, I'm Amanda Madden, and we are here for the Society for Italian Historical Studies Feature Series, where we feature researchers in the field who are doing exciting work, as well as our prize winners. We're here today with Glauco Schettini, who is the honorable mention from this year's SIHS Article Prize in Modern History. Glauco is a PhD candidate at Fordham University, and his research centers on religion and politics in 18th and 19th century Europe and the Atlantic world. In April 22, he will defend his dissertation titled The Invention of Catholicism, a Global Intellectual History of the Catholic Counter-Revolution, 1780s to 1840s. His dissertation investigates how European and Latin American counter-revolutionary thinkers transformed Catholicism during the Age of Revolutions. He is the author of more than a dozen articles and book chapters and the recipient of several prizes. Welcome today, Glauco. We're excited to have you here, and we're excited to hear more about your research.
Thank you.
Let's get started with the basic question. Tell us a bit more about the article and how it fits into the larger picture of your very exciting scholarship.
Yeah, I would say at its core, the article examines a book published by a prominent Catholic polemicist, Nicola Spedalieri, in 1791. So when the French Revolution has just started and notions of liberty, human rights, constitutional government are under discussion throughout Europe. And Spedalieri's book is titled On the Rights of Man, dei diritti dell'uomo. And it's particularly interesting, I think, for two reasons. The first is that it is written and published in Rome by someone who was very close to the Pope, to Pope Pius VI, and to the papal curia, the papal government. So it comes from the very heart of the Catholic Church. And the second reason is that this book says something that we would not expect to find in something that was written by a Catholic polemicist in 1791. And I will keep it short for now, but because I think that during this conversation, I'll have the chance to say more about that. But what the book does is to delineate a path of conciliation, or maybe I should say even convergence between the Catholic Church and the French Revolution. So what I do in the article is to analyze the book, to revisit the traditional narrative about Catholicism and the French Revolution, and more broadly about Catholicism and modernity, because we are used, I think all of us, to considering the Catholic Church as the quintessential opponent of the ideas and the political practices that came out of the French Revolution. And instead, I argue that this was not necessarily the case. Spedalieri's work tells us that at least for some Catholics, it was possible to accept some aspects of the political culture of the French Revolution, including popular sovereignty and human rights, as long as the Church could preserve the legal privileges that it had traditionally enjoyed in the confessional states of the early modern era. And this is what in the article I call Spedalieri's wager, because Spedalieri really bet that the most threatening aspect of the new political culture, which for him, of course, was secularization, could be fought by accommodating other aspects of this very political culture. So the end result of this process was the blueprint of what I call a confessional modernity. That's the title of the article, which would be a modernity that combined revolutionary political culture and confessional states. Basically, what Spedalieri had in mind was a Catholic French Revolution, I think I should say, a Catholic French Revolution that would produce a state based on popular sovereignty and human rights, but also one that recognized Catholicism as the official religion of the state, as the official state religion. Now, this kind of question, how did Catholics come to terms with the New World, because it was new in many ways, ushered in by the French Revolution? This question is really at the center of my broader research agenda, specifically at the center of my dissertation on which I'm working, and the work of my dissertation is really it deals with the Age of Revolutions. As you said, it's titled "The Invention of Catholicism," and it's an intellectual history of Catholicism in the Age of Revolution. And it is an investigation of Catholic counter-revolutionary culture specifically. And I argue in that work, in the dissertation, that what we mean today by Catholicism, even the very word actually, Catholicism, was a creation of counter-revolutionary intellectuals that were trying to respond to the new questions raised by the French Revolution. And so what they did in order to respond to these questions was to turn their religion, the Catholic religion, into a political ideology that could compete in the marketplace of ideas, so to say, with other emerging ideologies, and that could potentially gain also mass support, mass traction. And Spedalieri sits at the very beginning of this process. And actually, when I started researching this article at the end of my first year at Fordham, I did not know exactly what my dissertation was going to be about. And so in a way, the work I did for this article helped me come up with my dissertation topic, with my dissertation project. So although the article is not a chapter of the dissertation per se, I would say it's very much connected to my current work and to the broader questions I'm trying to address.
Thank you. That's really fascinating. So our next question is, so where does this fit into the bigger picture of the debates about, revolutionary thought during this time period?
Yeah. I mean, I guess in terms of the historiographical debate about these issues, I would say that my article participates in three main debates, in three main historiographical debates. And in a way, I've already hinted at least some of them. The first, of course, is a broader debate on secularization and on the role of religion in the modern world, which, as you know, of course, is one of the really big debates in our discipline. And so, whatever I will say now about that will be an oversimplification, but let me give it a shot. Let's say that there is a conventional narrative, right, that views the modern era as a time of decline of traditional religions, and more specifically views Catholicism, as I already said, as a quintessentially anti-modern force. Now, of course, I'm not the first to say that this narrative needs to be revisited and that religion remained significant throughout the modern era. But what my article contributes, I think, to this debate is the idea that the Age of Revolution specifically was a time in which religion changed, in which religion itself changed. Perhaps the time in which our modern conception of religion was really created. And so the idea that there was a confessional modernity, my argument in the article, confessional modernity, again, which would be a specific path towards modernity in which religion was crucial, means that the religion itself became something new, something modern. And again, I show this through Spedalieri in the article, and more broadly, I demonstrate this in my dissertation. Now, the second historiographical discussion that my article interacts with is the one about religion in the Enlightenment, specifically. Now, the days in which we used to consider the Enlightenment as the triumph of religion, or to use the very famous quote from Peter Gay, the rise of modern paganism, are gone. Of course, those days are gone. Recently, several historians have talked about the need to talk of a Catholic Enlightenment to describe the involvement of Catholic thinkers, right, in the great philosophical debates of the 18th century. But at the same time, we also know very well, of course, that Catholics were among the main participants in the intellectual tradition that has been called the counter-enlightenment. Spedalieri's work, I think, offers a very good vantage point to look at the connections between the Catholic Enlightenment and the counter-enlightenment, and maybe it allows us to stop seeing these two traditions as two monoliths in a way. Like many thinkers of the Catholic Enlightenment, Spedalieri used the key words, the key concept of the, let's say, mainstream Enlightenment. And again, we could mention human rights, popular sovereignty, constitutional governments, and all of that, and the list could go on. But like the writers of the counter, Enlightenment, his goal was to counter the secularization drive, which he saw as the most dangerous and also the most characteristic feature of the new culture. So what Spedalieri shows us, I think, is really the fact that there was a third way between Catholic Enlightenment and counter-Enlightenment, or to put it differently, that one could use some features of Enlightenment culture to counter some others. And that's the second historiographical contribution that I think the article makes. There's a third one, a third historiographical debate I deal with, of course, very obviously, is the one about Catholicism and human rights. That's, I mean, clear even just from the title, I guess, of Spedalieri's work. It has been argued, of course, that Catholics did not come to embrace human rights until the mid-20th century. And my article tells a very different story, it reveals a very different story. There were Catholic theories of human rights already in the 1790s, so at the very beginning of the modern debate on these issues. However, on the other hand, the article also shows that Catholics, or at least some Catholics, people like Spedalieri, used human rights for purposes that we would not necessarily consider progressive. Spedalieri's idea, after all, was that Catholics could accept human rights in exchange for the preservation of a confessional state. So it's a very different take, of course, on human rights than what we would normally consider the modern idea of human rights. But still, it still shows that there was some Catholic contribution to that debate already in the 1790s. It's not a 20th century development. It starts way before.
That was very interesting. Thank you so much for that detailed breakdown. So my next question is, what archival finds led you to your research? What sources have you been using?
Yeah, so this is a work of intellectual history. So it uses the very classic, I would say, intellectual history sources in a way that means, first of all, of course, the published works of thinkers and writers and their manuscripts when they are available, which they are in this case. And in this case, specifically letters by some of the people I deal with, including Spedalieri's own correspondence at the Vatican Library, and letters of other people who were very well informed, let's say, about what was going on in counter-revolutionary networks and within the papal curia. And so these letters provide us with very interesting information about the publication of books and the publication of this book in general, which was a very complicated process. They give us information about the circulation of books, the circulation of Spedalieri's book, specifically about the reactions it sparked and so on. And to this, I have added some diplomatic sources, specifically the correspondence of the Secretary of State, the Foreign Minister, let's say, of the Vatican, because the archives of the Secretary of State at the Vatican Archives contains reports from diplomats, of course, and these reports are usually about much more than just diplomacy and politics. They were much richer than I was expecting when I first opened the folders. They also contain a lot of information, actually, about the circulation of books and people. And so, for example, it was through these sources that I was able to trace the circulation of Spedalieri's work beyond the papal states, in places like Austria and Spain, and really throughout Europe. And actually, something interesting, I guess, about this, the sources and the way this is related to my broader project. As I said before, when I started this, when I started working on this article, when I went to the Vatican Archives for the first time to research what would become this article, I didn't know exactly what to work on in my dissertation. I was still I had just ended the first year of the PhD program, and I had in mind a work of Italian history, focusing on Italian history. And so I started looking at Spedalieri and at the debate around the book, because I had heard about the book. I hadn't read it yet, but I had heard about it, and it seemed interesting. It seemed an interesting starting point to work on something like revolution and religion in Italy. But then I went to the Vatican archives and found that the story that I was researching was not an Italian one, not just an Italian one. The book, of course, responded to the events of France that I knew in advance, but of course that's part of it, and it sparked reactions beyond Italy. It was translated into different languages. It traveled to very different contexts. So what I found was that if I wanted to work on these issues on religion and politics in the age of revolutions, I had to think of my work as a work of transnational, even global history, which is what happened eventually. So I think the good thing, the nice thing, is that really the sources that I began to find led me to the current project and to its global scope, in which, of course, Italian history still plays a role, but in a much more transnational setting, I guess.
Well, I think speaking of archives, I think we're all nostalgic for work in the archives, thanks to this past year and a half. So a more fun question. So what is your favorite place to go for either cafe or gelateria on your break, on your archival break?
Oh, that's a good one. It's a good question. Let's say, yeah, I would say that, yeah, there's this place. It's maybe 15 minutes from the Vatican, so not far, and it's definitely walkable distance. And I would go there at the end of a long day, of course, and spend at the archive or at the library. And it's actually a food cart, but it's really a fixture of the neighborhood. It's been there for decades, and I think the people who run it now are the third generation of the same family running it. So it's really one of Rome's most famous fixtures, I guess. Definitely the most famous food cart in Rome, and it's called La Sora Maria. Sora is the Roman for Signora, so Miss Mary. That would be the English translation, I guess. And they make a wonderful grattachecca. Grattachecca is a typical, may not be super famous, but it's a typical Roman delicacy. It's similar to granita, to Italian ice in English, but with pieces of fruit in it. It's very refreshing, so particularly good when it's hot outside. So if you go to the Vatican archives or the Vatican Library when it's hot outside during the summer, that's a very good place to go during a break, or again at the end of the research day.
That sounds delicious. I'm sure we'll all be checking that out next time we're in Rome. Well, thank you so much, Glauco. Very, very much enjoyed speaking with you today and hearing more about your research. And congratulations again on winning the honorable mention for the best article. We're all looking forward to reading it.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.